the Boston Public Schools and then the advocates? Councilor Campbell, I just received word from my staff that you'd like the advocates to go first, although I know the Boston Public Schools have a presentation that they're going to deliver, so I think it does make sense to allow them to go first, so then perhaps that will inform some of the comments and presentation from the advocates.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hopes was, sometimes a district can go really long and frankly, I want to be respectful of people's time. So I'm fine with that. I sometimes want to switch it around to allow folks to go first. But if they're going to go briefly for a presentation and then we can go straight to the advocates, that'd be great. Yeah, no, and there'll be no break between. We'll go from the BPS administration to your panelist on the advocates sort of panel, but all at once, and then we'll open it up from there. Okay. Thank you, Councilor Sabi George. Thank you. And then the Boston Public Schools, I'm not sure exactly. Let me look at my notes. Who's here from BPS, but Dr. Philippi, Regine, you'll have to correct me on the pronunciation of your name. I'm sorry about that. I don't know if she's here yet.
I'm sorry, I am here. I lost connection.
That's fine, no worries.
It's like Filipo, Filippo.
Oh, Filippo, I'm sorry. Thank you. I appreciate the correction, Dr. Filippo Pierre. And will you be leading the presentation?
Yes, I will.
Okay. So is it a brief presentation?
Yes, it is. And I'll make it even.
I love that. Faster. That sounds great. Thank you. And so Shane or whoever from central staff, when we're ready to go, I'm ready to go because it looks like we've got the sort of the critical mass of our panelists here.
I believe we're all set. I know we're live streaming right now.
Good to go on my end.
Thank you, Carrie. Councilor Campbell is lead sponsor. Are you ready for me to proceed?
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anissa Sabi George. I'm chair of the Council's Committee on Education. Oh, just lost my notes. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 executive order, the City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually. Today's hearing is on docket number 0358, in order for a hearing regarding summer learning opportunities and summer planning for the 2021-2022 school year for the Boston Public Schools. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed on boston.gov/city-council-TV. It will also be rebroadcast at a later date on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, Vios Channel 964. We will take a public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you wish to testify, please email Shane, SHANE, .pac, PAC, @boston.gov to sign up. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation or residence and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure that all comments can be heard. You may also submit written testimony by emailing ccc.education@boston.gov. We'll make sure that that written testimony that's been electronically submitted, or you can mail it to us at City Hall, will be added to the record. Today, I am joined by our lead sponsor of today's hearing, Councilor Campbell, and other colleagues, which I will check to see who's joined us prior to. I've just got to make sure I'm getting around on my screen here. You think we would manage this by now. I just want to note who has also joined us in addition to the lead sponsor. We are joined by no other colleagues at this time, although I'll announce them as they do arrive. Councilor Campbell, welcome. If you'd like to give some brief opening remarks. Councilor Campbell, I'm trying
to unmute myself. You would think we would know this by now, and for some reason that was not allowing me to do that. So
welcome, Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Counselor Asabi George. Clearly still working out the issues with Zoom. But thank you, Counselor Asabi George, again, for chairing this hearing. Thank you, of course, to council colleagues for being here. I also want to thank all of the panelists from the administration, the district, the various community organizations as well for being here. Greatly appreciate your continued partnership in the work. And for students whose families were hardest hit during the pandemic, who are also tuning in and have also been in touch with our office, want to also thank our families and our students as well. For students whose families were hardest hit during the pandemic, summer learning opportunities are essential. And this hearing is designed to have a conversation with the district to develop a clear plan for summer learning opportunities for our families. There are only 10 weeks left until the end of the school year, and our families and students are counting on us to offer learning and enrichment opportunities for them and their loved ones. And it's important that as we work to create a plan, of course, that folks not only know about it, but that we ensure plans are created in partnership with community-based organizations, families, and teachers. We've heard from educators that last summer was a missed opportunity in terms of planning. And we can also use this summer to do a better job, which is to allow our educators to plan for the fall and provides them, of course, with an opportunity not only to plan, but to do it in partnership with students, families, and each other in terms of making sure that they have everything in place to offer families an in-person instruction in the fall. But for this to happen, we, of course, need to invest in this additional planning time this summer and ensure a smooth transition to in-person instruction in September. There is an opportunity in that we've just received federal relief funds in the millions, which will give us the resources we need to stipend teachers, school leaders, and other staff members to have not only real planning time this summer, but also we could use these resources as a way to ensure folks in the community and our students are receiving academic instruction, tutoring, creative opportunities to get outside safely, of course, to respond to issues of mental health. This summer is a critical opportunity for us to do all of these things. I want to thank, of course, all of the panelists for being here today. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas, as well as the district for offering up plans. Looking forward to hearing more about what the district is thinking, how the federal dollars would be used for summer opportunities, and of course, engaging in conversation. Thank you.
Thank you to the lead sponsor, Councilor Campbell, for this. And we will get to our first panel. I also want to note that we've been joined by Councilor Bach, although I do want to get to our first panel so we can get into the discussion about this very important work. I'm grateful for everyone who is here with us. Certainly, as we had a little glimmer of summer this weekend, this hearing is so timely as we are beginning this public conversation on summer learning and opportunities for our Boston Public School students. As a former teacher, I know how critical summertime is for providing our students with those opportunities to develop personally, academically, and socially. And we have to learn from those challenges that we faced and those missed opportunities from last summer for sure. And I look forward to hearing from both our advocates and the Boston Public Schools administration that's here with us today. So I'd like to introduce the BPS panel, who is, I think, led by Dr. Filippo Pierre, who's the Deputy Chief Academic Officer, and I'll allow her to introduce her team that's with her today and get to the presentation. We will then immediately be followed by a number of advocates who are sort of living in this space and doing this work every single day as well, and then get to counselor's question and sort of that public dialogue and back and forth. Thank you, Dr. Filippo Pierre.
Sure. Good afternoon, distinguished counselors. My name again is Regine Filippo Pierre. I'm the Deputy Chief. I'd like to introduce my team with me. We have quite a bit of us here because it's a joint effort to put together summer learning. I'll just go in order of team members that I see. I'd like to introduce Marcia Inez Mitchell, Solange Marchand, Shannon Hayes, Dr. Sylvia Romero Johnson. Do we have any other team members with us? Okay, great. I will invite Shannon to share the deck. Okay, so first, thank you for having us as we provide a very quick update on summer learning. Our aspiration for this summer is that every student has a plan for the summer and that parents are empowered to choose the right fit for their child. So that may mean a BPS program, that may mean an outside program. The plan may include academics and or enrichment. It may include for our high school students employment as well or internships. Our presentation today is intended to provide you with an update of our plans. We'll provide you with the participation data from years past and look at our initial projections for participation and the cost for this upcoming summer. We are thrilled to share that this year we will convene in person for summer programming. Families can plan to have summer learning opportunities beginning on July 6th to August 6th. And with some of our programming beginning July 12th and running through August 20th. Families can plan on hearing from us in the coming weeks around registration. The registration link will actually be available at the end of this week, and we're planning our communication now with families to ensure that each family hears from us and has the option for programming. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, we're skipping that slide. Okay. This year, we anticipate that we'll have over 26,000 seats available for students in summer programming. This includes both BPS programs through our fifth quarter office, ESY, and others, as you'll be hearing later on. We also want to highlight the projected number of high school summer jobs. We anticipate that over 1,600 seats will be available for our high school students through the PIC program. Here we show the number of students served over the past 2 years in comparison to the projected number of seats for summer 2021. We would like to highlight the slight increase in PIC jobs, ESY seats through Boston After School and seats through Boston After School and beyond. Though in some programs there was a slight decline in the number of available seats, but overall there is an increase in seats. Student demographics last summer was representative of our district student population, with Black students making up 38% of students. 44% of our students were from Latinx communities, and 8% were white students, and 6% of our students were identified as Asian. 44 to 40% were students with IEPs and English learners, respectively. We would like to highlight a particular summer program from the Excellence for All team. This was the Social Justice Academy, which I think many folks heard about. It's really representative of the kinds of programming we want kids to experience, at least academically. Hopefully, again, this year in person, it'll be even better. Shannon, would you mind playing the first 90 seconds? I don't think we can hear.
We don't have audio.
Okay. All right, so in that case, you have access to this slide deck, and so you'll be able to see some of the great work that happened last year that we'd like to continue on for this year. At this point, I'll turn it over to Shannon, who is our Director of Summer Learning.
Thank you, Regine. Can you share the presentation so I can read my notes?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Regine. So our teams have been working with facilities, food and nutrition, health services, human capital, payroll, translations, and communications to plan the operational framework for summer programs. We've begun the hiring process, and we're working with an advisory group of BTU members and leadership to strategize around staffing for the summer. We've also worked with our translation team to create communication for all families and schools to make sure everyone is aware about the available opportunities for summer that you'll hear about during this presentation. We're preparing professional development and resources for staff, as well as ordering curriculum and PPE to make sure that we are preparing for a safe and enriching in-person summer with remote components for families who request it. Next slide. Paying careful attention to any additional social emotional needs created by or exacerbated by the pandemic has been critical to our summer planning. In order to support students' mental health and social emotional learning, we have put in place a number of supports. Teachers will receive restorative justice training on Tier 1 community building, which is characterized by the use of social emotional skills and practice in the form of classroom circles, to build relationships, create shared values and guidelines, promote restorative conversations, all with the goal of building a caring, intentional, and equitable community with conditions conducive to learning. In partnership with Boston After School and Beyond this year, we're focused on supporting the positive development of youth voice and autonomy through a PD that walks professionals through their own biases and what youth can and cannot do, while supporting the creation of pro-social programming that affords youth greater choice and input into the activities and structure of all summer learning. For our Tier 2 and 3 supports, we have social workers in place and available over the summer to support students presenting with more significant behavioral, social, or emotional concerns. While we plan for the summer together, there will be a number of different program initiatives. So I'm going to pass it to Solange Marsan to tell you about Summer Early Focus, our early childhood program.
The P22 department will run programs in underserved neighborhoods and will be located at the West Zone ELC in Jamaica Plain, East Boston EEC in East Boston, Edison Parks EES in Mattapan, Orchard Gardens in Dorchester. Summer Early Focus will be a full-day program offering academics with a highly engaging and culturally responsive content for all of our 3 grades. Students reinforce their skills in foundational literacy, math, social, emotional, and with some enrichment activities. The content will be delivered by a highly qualified staff of 20-to-2 ratio, incorporated in the program of field trips, on-site visitors that will complement students' summer learning experiences. Lessons learned from last year, we are planning on servicing 500 children. With our budget, we plan on building individual kits for materials for each student in our programming, including all K to second students who will be using our curriculum and are part of the 5th quarter summer learning. Back to you, Shannon.
Thanks, Solange. So the 5th quarter summer learning academies are 5-week full-day programs focused on academic enrichment, staffed by BPS teachers and run by a school or a community-based organization. Some of the summer learning academies feature interest-based experiences like outdoor exploration, sailing, soccer, or arts. These programs are offered in partnership with Boston After School and Beyond and aim to strengthen the effectiveness of school-community partnerships and close opportunity gaps by providing engaging, enriching academic and social emotional support to BPS students across the city. Next slide. We've engaged 30 community-based organizations to run 43 of our summer learning academies. These programs all feature engaging enrichment activities to develop student social emotional skills, increase student efficacy by building skills and competencies, and get students moving outside through activities led by our community partners like Thompson Island, Outward Bound, Crossroads Camp Wing, Boston Scores, the Franklin Park Zoo, and many more. High school credit recovery programs are run by schools and provide a critical opportunity for students to complete or recover course credits with social emotional supports and student-centered, differentiated instructional tasks consistent with each school's instructional focus. This year, we have 25 schools that will run summer credit recovery programs for over 300 students. I will now pass it over to Sylvia Romero-Johnson to tell you about programs offered by the Office of English Learners.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I am excited to share with you the summer learning update for the summer of 2021. We know summer learning opportunities for our English learners are so important in order to continue building language skills, build social emotional skills, prevent summer learning loss, and give students exposure to social and academic language opportunities and enrichment. Through the collaboration with other teams, other summer program teams, the Office of English Learners is ensuring that our English learners of all ELD levels will have access to programming that will work best for them and their variety of needs. In particular, we're partnering with the early childhood team to ensure our English learners have access to this programming, as well as reserving at least 80 seats for students at ELD levels 1 through 3 with Office of English Learner funding. Based on where our English learners live in Boston, we are working to ensure that our offerings are located strategically across the city in order to meet our students' needs. I am now going to pass it on to Ethan Davelmont Burns to speak about the special education summer program. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. I hope everybody's well. We are looking forward to the summer and planning a comprehensive plan for both ESY and compensatory services in special education. And so we want to review both of those pieces. So extended school year, ESY, which we have done before. You can see a sample schedule here in the schedule. It's a 5-hour day. It's going to be 5 days a week. And this year, we are extending it by 1 week to provide students with additional learning opportunities due to the COVID-19 school closures. So we're showing that investment there to make sure students get what they need. Here are the dates, and we have close to 5,000 students that are eligible for this. We certainly anticipate that a higher percentage of those students will take advantage of those opportunities this year. So we're anticipating about 3,300 students this year. We are also not only working on regular IEP goals, we are also working on STEM and other opportunities as well that we are looking forward to and excited to have the opportunity that students will do that as well, doing CEL and STEM. So we're looking forward to that. Okay, and next slide. And this year we will also be offering what we're calling summer learning for compensatory services. This is a new component this year to address regression. This is for students who are eligible for ESY, for students who are not eligible for ESY per IEP, they can participate in this programming from July 12th to August 13th. Students who are eligible for ESY in their IEP will receive these compensatory services during ESY and also during that additional week from August 16th to August 20th. For both of these programs, both compensatory services and ESY, we will be offering both remote and in-person options. And finally, just want to share that students who are not eligible for ESY but have been determined eligible for compensatory services will have the option to receive compensatory services or to receive only the compensatory services, or will be able to participate in a 3-hour program that will include other compensatory services like ELA, math, rules-based reading, or other programs that may be in your IEP goals. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marcia. Marcia?
So good to see everyone. This summer, we are super excited that the City of Boston's Office of Workforce Development is planning to continue a Learn and Earn initiative that was launched last summer in response to the pandemic. And this model really allows our young people to take an actual college course and earn a weekly stipend for attending the class, engaging with their professor on a weekly basis, and also taking advantage of some of the other resources our campuses have to offer, such as tutoring resources and college and career advising and coaching. They will engage in this for a duration of 6 weeks and up to 25 hours per week. Eligibility will be based on their grade level, as well as we'll be looking at income levels to make sure that the students with the highest need has access to this amazing course opportunity. There will be about 150 seats in the Learn and Earn initiative this summer. The partnership will be with Bunker Hill Community College, and the course grades, the end of course grades that the students earn, will be applied to the BPS transcript and can be used as a Mass Core elective. Next slide. So many of you are familiar with the Boston Private Industry Council. They have picked career specialists across our BPS high schools that really supports our students with placements, internships, and service industry jobs. Their career specialists really work with our school counselors and other partners to increase the readiness of our students to access these opportunities, meaning really supporting them with understanding the application processes, all of the options and opportunities that are available to them, because sometimes it can be so complex with various applications across entities. So we are excited that the PIC this coming year, they're projecting about 650 jobs. The last time I spoke with them, they say they're looking at closer to 2,000 job placements for our young people. And so we are excited that they are continuing to inform our families and our students around these processes and work with them to ensure that they have a full understanding of these opportunities. They have created an initial job application as an initial step for students to access their summer jobs. Next slide. And in addition to the PIC, these are the 5 intermediary job placement agencies. And through the ABCD Summer Works, YOU, YEE, MLK Scholars, and Success Link, our students will have access to jobs in the public as well as the private sectors. Students will also build leadership skills, financial literacy, and give back to their communities in meaningful ways. So it's just not about work. For example, through the ABCD Summer Works program, it is a 7-week career development opportunity where the initial portion really consists of job readiness workshops that includes things like money basics before the student even transitions to the work site or the paid internship. All of these intermediaries were convened by the city's Department of Youth Engagement and Employment to develop strategies to get students connected. And since that convening, BPS has held a large kind of district-wide meeting with our school counselors, our partners and members of our family, community, and advancement team to allow these intermediaries to share specifics about their programs as well as the application processes. So we are providing clear information to our students and advising them on how they can leverage these jobs, even if they have to take coursework for credit recovery or other course opportunities in the district. We don't want our young people to get locked out of jobs if they have to take coursework. So the next slide. I actually think that concludes our presentation. If there are no additional slides, and we can open it up for a transition or for questions, depending on the structure.
I appreciate that very much. Next will be, I also want to note that we've been joined by Counselors Mejia and Flynn, and I'd like to welcome our next panel to do their presentation. I'm not sure what the format is or the order, is, but we are joined by Suleika Soto, Yi Chin Chen, and Lisa Lazare, who will be also presenting today. I'm not sure who will be starting. I see that Lisa's maybe ready. Welcome.
Thank you.
You would introduce yourself for the record and offer your testimony, your presentation.
Of course, my name is Lisa Lazar. I am the State Director at Educators for Excellence, and I'm a West Roxbury resident. Well, good afternoon, counselors, esteemed counselors, BPS representatives, and advocates. As I said, my name is Lisa Lazar, and I have the pleasure of being a former chemistry teacher and current State Director for Educators for Excellence based in Boston. Our organization's mission is to get educators involved in policy-making processes that impact their classrooms and ensure that no decisions are made that impact them without their voices being at the table. We believe that teachers are the ultimate education policy experts because they see firsthand how laws and policy changes play out in the classroom. As such, I am here today to reflect the perspectives and voices of our BPS educators, most of whom are still in the classroom teaching at this hour on the topic of assessing and addressing student learning post-pandemic. According to IFRI's national survey of educators from January, Voices from the Classroom, there were some definite warning signs in terms of engagement. Over 61% of our educators surveyed said that student learning was worse than pre-pandemic. 57% said student attendance was worse, and 60% said homework completion was even worse. In that same survey, educators supported the following policy responses, most of which could be funded using the funds from the American Rescue Plan and would be expansions of things happening now, and mostly are looking for these approaches to be embedded in the existing school day. And on that end, they named that 61% of all public educators called for expanding tutoring or after-school programs. 54% called for in-school remediation strategies embedded in the regular school day, and only 39% had called for a more robust summer school options. In bringing it down into the micro, I want to elevate two stories from two educators who were speaking specifically on learning loss for this summer. And I want to elevate Janelle, a Mattapan resident and a middle school teacher in Mattapan. She spoke to me in particular on summer school options and said, it needs to be interactive and enriching. Students shouldn't feel like they're being punished. Teachers should be adequately compensated, and it should be in person as much as possible. Hearing the plans for what BPS has, I know it's hitting a lot of those options, so I know that educators will be really happy to hear about some of the plans that are coming in. Another educator had a lot of thoughts on this as well. And this is from Savannah, a Roxbury resident and Roxbury High School educator, who wanted to make clear that when discussing the term learning loss, that sometimes does not fully capture what happened over the last year, and that in planning summer learning, equity must be at the forefront. Learning loss often implies students learned nothing during remote learning, which is unequivocally false. While, of course, they did not learn as much as they would have otherwise, learning happened. This also disregards the massive amount of social emotional learning that occurred this year. The summer learning plan also needs to be careful to avoid being inequitable. Students may need to use the summer to increase hours at their jobs, travel to see family, or take a much needed break. It's difficult to provide a fully equitable option, but teachers and student voices must be included in designing these summer learnings. Teachers, many of whom are understandably feeling really burned out right now, are clearly somewhat split on their openness to participating in things like summer school and extended day. But importantly, teachers seem to be most open to these solutions if they include additional pay for additional work. And we can use federal funding from ARP to support this. And we strongly believe that writing off this generation of students as a lost generation is incredibly damaging and unnecessarily pessimistic, and that we should value the other forms of learning that students may have undertaken at home and in their communities this year. As a result, making up for unfinished learning this summer and through the next school year does not have to come at the expense of a well-rounded and emotionally nurturing education. We know that simply focusing narrowly on reading and math without meaningful connection to other subject areas is deeply unpopular and detrimental to students' learning and engagement. In addition, strategies like cutting time for free play for young students, shortening or canceling electives, and packing curriculum too full for teachers to stop and meet students where they are have all proved damaging and shouldn't be replicated in our approach to this problem. We also should not simply go back to old standards and curricula and methods for content delivery in our rush to address learning loss before using this as an opportunity to rethink what we teach students and how we do so. And with that, bills like SD 1965, the Racially and Culturally Inclusive Curriculum Act, are already plotting a path forward in Massachusetts that is better and more inclusive. So in conclusion, for E-Free Boston and our educators believes that developing a nuanced understanding of student learning during the pandemic is essential for moving forward. Prioritizing interventions and supports can be built into the school day and the summer without overburdening teachers and students. They would like to see more frequent check-ins with students about capacity and mental health are also a must. Finally, we must see this as an opportunity to innovate on how we teach and what content we prioritize. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. If we have Yi-Chin, welcome. If you'd like to introduce yourself for the record and your organization and give your testimony. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. But before I start, I'd actually like to offer if Suleika Soto would like to go first as a parent voice in this. If not, I'm happy to start.
You should start. She's still, go ahead.
Almost there. All right. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Yi-Chin Chen. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of Children Boston. We're a Roxbury-based organization focusing on supporting families and children and a 12-and-a-half-year model. We select our kids when they're in kindergarten, and we support them all the way through high school graduation, no matter what. This topic is really personal to us. It's really important and timely. And I think, today I will use my time to share what we have seen in the last year, and as well as to offer some suggestions and recommendation as we march forth with this citywide focus on how do we get our young people back into the school. Friends of the Children Boston has a guiding principle no matter what. That means that we will show up for our young people and families no matter what. Through this no matter what approach in the last year, we actually learned a lot about what worked and what does not work for our families. The families that we work with often are the most impacted by the external factors around them. They're considered some of the most vulnerable families of the city. And what we really learned is that any approaches and processes that has to be created and in celebrating and supporting the student loss has to have an equitable philosophy, as well as has to be anchored and guided by the voices of caregivers, young people, as well as educators. These are the people that were the most impacted personally by the pandemic and will be also on the front line and continue to be the most impacted. And so whatever we're planning, we must find ways to integrate the voices of these constituents, and not just the one that shows up. We have to find ways to get to those that won't show up, but are showing up in places that we don't reach them. And so with that said, I would like to offer, just on the highest level, I think 4 really key elements that we're learning that we want to urge both nonprofit partners, policymakers, as well as our district to focus on. As we think about how do we bring our young people how do we support our young people in their continuing learning, there are really 4 key elements that have to show up in any program that you're planning or any processes that you're designing. Please keep these 4 key elements that in mind. First is the social, emotional, mental health needs of our young people. Many of our young people experience really significant loss through the pandemic. They lost loved ones, they lost experiences, they lost relationships. Many of our young people found themselves isolated for an entire year. So whatever process and program that you are planning must have social, emotional, mental health support as a key element of that. That also must show up in a culturally relevant way. Oftentimes when people think about social emotional support, they immediately go to counseling. That isn't always the case for all cultures and for all communities. Some communities really need gatherings and collective actions. And so if you're building and thinking about supporting young people's social emotional needs and mental health needs, it has to be done in a way that's familiar to them. And I would, once again, lean on the voices of the caregivers and the young people to guide you in how they would like to heal, how would they like to grieve, and how they would like to acknowledge, some of their experiences this last year. Secondly, I think the targeted academic remediation and enhancement is critical. That does not, to me, the caregivers and the young people that we have talked to would prefer that not show up in yet another class that they're signing up for. It's to them, summer is a time of, enrichment. Summer also represents a lot of togetherness. And so, we must be able to find a way to build in academic enhancement and remediation that works and that will work for our young people. And also that's an individualized approach. Many of the families that have more resources are able to bring in private tutors, are able to, do all of these and pay for experiences that have academic enhancement and remediation built in. We must do that for all students, not just for the ones that can afford it or have the resources to buy it. Third is one that I haven't heard yet, and I really, really think this will be and would determine the success of our next school year, which is whole family support. The pandemic is not over. The crisis is far from over. We could have a wave of eviction that is on the horizon. Folks have lost employment that are no longer there and are still struggling to make ends meet. If we're planning anything that has to do with the BPS students, they don't live in isolation. They live in a family unit in whatever shape or form. And so whatever we plan, we must still be guided and use a whole family approach and utilize whatever resources and allocation of additional resources to support the caregivers and support the caring adults in these kids' lives. So then they can show up to school ready to learn because their family is stabilized and feels supported. Lastly, allow for reacclimation phase. Our young people and families have spent an entire year in a crisis. For us to believe that somehow immediately they can sign up for a program and show up on the first day and ready to go is not realistic. I think whatever that we need to do, and people's lives have changed. Some of the older BPS students might have taken on additional employment that needs time to adjust for work schedules in order for them to take advantage of additional summer learning and or opportunities to enhance themselves or to make up for some of the learning grounds that they want to make up. So whatever processes and programs have to be flexible. So think about maybe an ongoing rolling enrollment instead of a deadline enrollment. Think about how you would get your words out. Think about maybe a shorter program instead of a 6-week program where you have to sign up all at once or nothing. Again, reacclimation is going to take time because people's lives have been permanently changed. And we need to allow for the flexibilities for that. Lastly, I'd like to just, once again, I think, highlight that personal and relational outreach is going to be fundamental to the success of our young people. Their academic success is going to be far more likely if they and their families believe that somebody on the other end is going to be there for them, and somebody on the other end is there cheering them on to make sure that they are successful. That means that schools, teachers, nonprofit organizations, instead of doing a mass approach, should be picking up the phone, reaching out to families individually, tell them how excited you are for them to be a part of the Your Summer program or an opportunity. This personalized approach we have learned in the pandemic, heard from educators, families, young people, that those are the personal touches that kept them going because they believe that somebody cared if they show up. So we need to be able to do that and do that for all of the Boston Public School students this summer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Suleika Soto. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Suleika Soto, and I am a BPS parent. I am here today as a representative of the Citywide Parent Council, which is the parent organization for all the school parent councils. And I just wanted to share a few of the concerns or some of the concerns that parents and other community members have expressed or what they would like to see in the summer learning programs. So I know that the main concern that a lot of the parents have brought up in different meetings have been safety. As we know, as we're approaching the summer, the cases have been very volatile. And we have learned that more students have been infected within the schools than adults have as of recently. So a lot of the concerns are around how will we ensure that there is safety, that transportation is going to be also safe. Transportation is another concern, just making sure that that's going to be safe. I would say another thing, and I'm sorry because I don't have anything prepared, but I do, I have my notes. So a lot of things that families and teens have also expressed are the procedures, like what the curriculums will look like and how will we ensure that our kids are engaged and will actually attend. We have known that attendance has lowered a lot during this COVID. So how will we make sure that the outreach is being done and that kids are continuing to be engaged? How will we reach out to parents to ensure that all parents know about this, not just the ones that are plugged in, like were mentioned before? I know that the district and us parent councils and citywide councils have had trouble with engaging parents and, making sure that they know about all the resources that are available to them. Unfortunately, we find that it's always the same parents. So how will we ensure that we're doing the outreach, that the outreach is being done in the native language of the parents? And how will we make sure that all these programs are as accessible as possible to everyone all across the board? Another, so outreach is a big thing. Just making sure that everyone knows. Sometimes we might have to go to the old school ways of just mailing brochures, or may have you. Not everyone has access to the internet and is able to read their emails on a consistent basis. A lot of parents just don't have access to that. So maybe just going to the old school way of doing things by mail or anything like that would also help. So just making sure that as many people know about these programs as possible. The same with the teens, same with students, and making sure that they know about these programs and that they're being engaged, that the things that are being taught are things that interest them. They're ethnically and culturally, that it's equitable, and that they're learning about things that are surrounding them, and just that it's very engaging as can be, just because I know that that's a problem that we've been having with engaging students. And then also making sure that social emotional piece is key when it comes to all of the curriculums, that's the backbone of everything that is being taught. Just ensuring that there is that social emotional piece is always there. And so I believe that's all I have for now. And then also, one last thing, ensuring that all these programs are free. We do have that federal money that has come in. So how can we make sure that these parents are not worried about how they are going to pay for these programs? There has been learning loss. Students do, like mentioned before by Ms. Ian, students want to be able to work, especially those in the higher grades. So how can we make sure that we are compensating them, or as many as possible, to make sure that they're engaged and that they're not choosing to work over, making up for this lost learning and time that they've had. They could do both at the same time. So thank you very much, and you guys have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much, Ms. Soto, for joining us and sharing your remarks and representing the Citywide Parent Council. Just looking for my rest of my notes here. I also want to, I think we've gotten to all the panelists. Thank you, everybody, for the presentation, both from the Boston Public Schools, E4E, Friends of Children Boston, as well as the Citywide Parent Council. I will start with, and we'll have a timer because we have been joined by a few of our colleagues. As I mentioned before, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Mejia, Councilor Bach did step away from the hearing, but was here for the presentations. I'll set the timer for 5 minutes and start with our lead sponsor, Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George, and thank you to all of the panelists. First of all, thank you to the administration for the presentation, and to all of the panelists, particularly who are from the community, for your insight. Obviously, the purpose of the hearing were to bridge the two, because clearly I think I saw some folks from the administration sort of nodding their head in terms of, I think, things to inform what the district does over the summer, which is great. One question I do have, based on the questions from or what was just lifted up from the panelists, are the programs that were mentioned by the district, and there's a whole array of them. Are they free? The second question is, there was a lot of talk about the importance, of course, of each program, regardless of the type of program, having a mental health, social, emotional learning component. So I would love to hear the district talk a little bit more about just that, whether or not each program that is being developed has those components. And then my last question is, will every family have access to a mental health counselor? So for example, if they can't find one on their own, are they able to go through the district for their student to be able to access a mental health counselor? And of course, not just for the students, but for the educators as well.
Sure, I can start to answer some of those questions, and I'll invite my colleagues as well to chime in. So in terms of, I think the first question is whether or not the programs are free. All of our BPS programs are free. They're funded by us, so families do not have to worry about paying for them. The second question around just ensuring that there are supports for mental health. And specifically, I think this idea of supporting our students socially and emotionally during crazy, crazy times, right? We were really, really intentional this year to think about various ways of doing that. So the first, I think, one of your panelists mentioned, I think your last panel mentioned the fact that culturally relevant content allows you to feel connected, right? And so we saw that happen last summer, and I'll point to a program like Social Justice Academy, for example. So we've been making very intentional efforts to do that, right, for every program this year. We're also making the SGA curriculum available. Kids are investigating things that are very close to their communities and feeling very empowered about that. One example is looking at institutional racism, right? In the 7th and 8th grade, 7th, 8th graders have access to that curriculum. The other piece is that it has been historically part of summer learning that we ensure that all programs attend to the social emotional needs of students. And so in the application for programming, that is explicit. The last piece is the fact that we have made social workers available by region. So each program will know that they have access to a social worker. So I don't know, Shannon, if you wanted to say a little more about that, to the point of having mental health workers.
We are working with our behavioral health team to solidify the plans for that. So I don't have additional information to share beyond the fact that we have determined that we'll be able to fund social workers for the summer. So we're still working on the logistics of that.
Okay, that would be helpful to, thank you, Shannon, thank you both, to know, because that is one of the questions that comes up outside of will each program have that social emotional learning component, is will a student, for example, be able to access a mental health clinician, a social worker, and then on the flip side, of course, any of our educators or staff. So can look for further details on that. I'm not sure if my time has run out, Counselor Asabi George. Okay.
You have another minute. Go ahead.
And I'll end with this question. I can save other questions for the next round. Going back to the point around, this was Yi Chen's point, around the whole family. Obviously, these are incredible programs that young people will be accessing, obviously, with their family. Has the district worked with any of the other city departments? I'm thinking about D&D, the Office of Housing Stability, the various departments that we even interface with to make sure that folks aren't being evicted, helping folks get access to unemployment benefits, you name information about vaccines. How has the district worked with them to develop these programs? And how might families that are interacting with the BPS programs also have this information readily available as they navigate other pieces that might be affecting the family?
I'm going to share what I know, and then I'll definitely get back to the members of the council with additional information. So I know that we have made available services around food services. I know that schools in particular have reached out to families and are working closely with families. One of the things that I was fascinated by was this idea of the whole family. So I was kind of jotting down like feverishly all of the notes that your panelists mentioned, because I wanted to just go back and make sure that in fact that we had that point of view. And I know that there are certain points that we connect with families. I'm not quite sure that we have been as intentional as your panelists have talked about really thinking about the whole family in every single point of the summer learning cycle. So I was actually really happy to see that, but I will get back to you on that.
That's great. And thank you for your candidness. And I'm sure Yi Chen and all of the panelists want to make themselves available to you guys. Thank you, Councillor Asabi George. I can wait for the next round.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Next, we have Councillor Mejia and then Councillor Flynn. Councillor Mejia? We may have lost her. We'll go to Councillor Flynn. Welcome, Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Councillor Asabi George. Thank you for your leadership, Councilor Sabi George, on this important issue. And thank you to the panelists for working so hard during this difficult period of time to provide as much opportunity and programming to our young people across the city during this loss of, of an academic year or services or programming. So we appreciate everything that you're doing. I guess my question is, well, a question and a comment is, and I apologize, I wasn't at the beginning of the meeting. I know it was on PowerPoint, but are we able to get information that we could provide to our constituents about what opportunities are available this summer so I can share that document? I think Councilor Sabi George, we're able to share that document. Is that right?
Yeah, we should be able to share those slides, but if the district, maybe through Ms. Costello, could send us a one-page or an appropriate graphic to share with our constituents, that'd be great.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Even if it was a one page with like a one sentence about what the program does, that would be very helpful. And then I just wanted to mention one other issue is I was at Tufts Medical Center today meeting with some medical professionals about access to mental health counseling for for immigrants, mostly in the Asian community or the Chinese community. So we have some challenges. I'm just want to know if there are any programs that you're offering that might benefit immigrants that have had a very difficult year, and does that include language access in many of the immigrants, like a lot of other people as well, dealt with food access related challenges. So I'll listen to your comment, and I have no further questions. Just want to say thank you to the panelists for exceptional work, and I'll listen to your response.
I can take that question. Thank you for that question, Councillor Flynn. I mentioned in the presentation that in addition to all of the summer programs offered by various departments, there is a specific program that the Office of English Learners makes available, particularly for students at the emerging levels of proficiency in English. So definitely there will be support for home languages, and in the future we want to increase more of that throughout the district. As I mentioned, based on where students live, we're trying to strategically place those programs so that they're accessible throughout the city.
Excellent. Thank you very much for everyone's important work on the outreach this summer. Thank you, Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you very much. Councilor Mejia, have you rejoined us? Welcome, Councilor Mejia.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm having internet issues. I think you lost me for a second there. So we have my timer on, Councilor?
Yes. Welcome, Councilor Mejia.
I know you got me on timer here. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. I'm curious about a few things. How are we implementing I think we're talking about social emotional, building it into the curriculum, specifically into the curriculum. Is that correct? I'm just curious about the whole mental health professional to see how it's specifically being brought into the learning space. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then I have two more questions. Do you want them all now, or do you want them on? No, I'm going to do them all because I need answers to all of these things. I'm curious, are we thinking about utilizing summer sessions to create also apprenticeships, opportunities with local trade organizations and other businesses? I think that we have to be super mindful that learning is not just about academics, but that learning is about creating opportunities for students to be able to access career exploration. So I'm just curious what initiatives are being sought as it relates to that, learning the classroom could be the city, right? So let's just think about that. And then I really do appreciate Suleika and a lot of the questions and comments that she brought to the table, specifically around the civic and parent engagement. I'm curious, what role did parents play in helping the administration design the summer learning programming effort? What role was played by parents in particular and students? And I only have 3 minutes left, so I just need these really short answers, and then I can follow up with you if I need to go a little bit further. But I do want those questions addressed. Thank you.
Sure. Your first question is around our intentionality of bringing social emotional learning into the classroom. For that, I'm going to ask Shannon to chime in, and then I'm going to ask Marsha to chime in around the apprenticeships for the summer.
Sure. So for mental health supports, we are providing training to all teachers on restorative justice, which is a culturally responsive approach to community building and the tier 1 piece of that. So in addition to having it embedded in the community, teachers are receiving specific training around that, as well as on how to encourage youth voice and autonomy in their programs. And then we'll also have that piece that we talked about with the social workers available to all students. And then I'll pass it to Marsha.
In regards to apprenticeships, beyond what our 5 intermediaries will be brokering for our students district-wide, we are working very closely with the district's Office of Career and Technical Education to open up access to summer apprenticeships aligned to students' CTE pathways. There's also various agencies such as Digital Ready, who has presented to our school leaders around career development opportunities that are paid internships during the summer months. So it's a both and. It's both being brokered directly from the district, but also through these intermediary organizations that I mentioned.
Oh, I'm excited about that, Marsha. I think they're going to get paid too.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And then I'm curious who can talk. Wow, we're good on time. Who could talk to me about the family engagement and the role that they played in helping to shape this experience?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about that. So when we think about the role of the families, I think most often about the schools. And so I'm really excited at the fact that we have a number of school programs happening. And so I've heard from principals that there is a direct correlation between the kinds of programs they're putting in place and the voice of the families, right? So they're putting programs in place in response to family needs, right? And to the needs of their students. So I'm actually ecstatic about that. So that's one level. Another level is the fact that we hear informally and formally from parents. So informally, parents are contacting us. So we have a program right now that's an after-school program where parents are formally contacting us and saying, my kid needs X, or my kids need Y, or this is too much. All of that input. And then the formal is through a survey. We do parent surveys. And so all that data is used to create summer programming.
Thank you. Now you see me anxiously trying to get one more word in before I get muted. Is that to Suleika's point in terms of just really thinking outside the box for traditionally, for people who are not on social media, I would really urge the district to identify not just nonprofit organizations, but to really tap into businesses like the bodegas, the hair salons, all of these spaces where families convene and go, because this is an amazing opportunity, and especially if it's free. It would be such a waste of time and energy if those who need it most don't have access to it, and those who are usually privileged, who know how to read and write and who know how about all of these great events and activities, that they will be the ones that are lining up, right? So we need to be really intentional about making sure, and I would even ask the district to really put some action plans around like the percentage of the most vulnerable students that are signing up and how you're gauging that. To Suleika's point, I think she really brought a lot of some of the things that I would bring to the conversation. So I'm really happy that she was here to inform our thinking, but that's just one of the things that I wanted to offer, is just being really intentional about your outreach. Thank you.
Do I have time to answer?
I don't know. George.
thoughts.
Of course you do. I try not to mute colleagues or guests. Thank you.
Okay, I'll be really quick. So we do also work through external and third, our community organizations. So I have an example, for example, of the Immigrant Family Services Institute, IFC, that I've worked really closely with. They're really connected to the Haitian to the Haitian community. They bring programming to us and say, this is what our families need. So there is the voice of community members, families who are not connected, who may not feel, I'm from an immigrant community, right? So who may not feel connected to the formal structures of BPS, but who are connected to their community-based organizations. And so those community-based organizations come to us and say, these, again, just like the schools, these are the programs our families need, and we're funding those programs free of charge for families.
Thank you, Councilor Sabido. I was just joking. I know you don't mute us. I'm just teasing you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and thank you for all of those responses. I am, for my questions, let me just start my timer. For my questions, I'm most interested in the funding source. I appreciate that these are free to our students across the district, and appreciate that there's 26,000 plus seats available for students, and that is certainly just less than 50% of our student population, or just more than 50% of our student population. And I understand that many of our students find other opportunities on their own or aren't engaged in summer programming. So I guess a two-part question. One, where is the funding coming from to cover these expenses? And two, should we have more students than we do seats trying to access some of these programs? What are the backup plans for our students across the district? Dr. Philippa Pierre, maybe. Thank you.
Sure. So district funding comes from a variety of sources. This year, we're using the grant funding from the federal government really to enhance summer programming. So in terms of the availability of seats, we increased the seats from last year. We're anticipating that we have enough seats available. Again, a number of our schools are putting on programs for the summer. So we actually anticipate that we're able to meet needs. We do also work really closely with Boston After School and Beyond, and they have a whole network of other programs that they provide, or a network of other folks that they work with. And so we do think that between the programs that we offer, the close relationship that we have with Boston After School and Beyond, that we're going to be able to meet the needs of our families.
Great, thank you for that. So most of that funding will come, especially for the added capacity, will come from federal funds?
That's right.
Appreciate that. And I know that the Assistant Superintendent Diablamont is also on, and wanted to make sure that we were also really fulfilling some of the needs of our higher needs students and students on IEPs and 504s over the summer opportunity. I know that was part of the presentation, but Ethan, if you could just speak a little bit more to that, that would be helpful for those listening at home. Thank you.
Sure. Just that we absolutely thank you for the question. Boston has a history of offering ESY and a robust ESY program, and we're excited to be able to offer it again this year, and excited to be able to offer it both in person and also remotely for those who feel like that is better for them and their families for whatever reason. So we're excited to be able to do that. So that will be regular ESY program. And for those who qualify for compensatory services, we will also, if it fits, and those are individualized decisions, but we are offering an extra week of ESY services as well. So so we hope that that will help some of the regression that has happened as well. For students who are not eligible for ESY, we are also, but are eligible for compensatory services, we're offering what we call summer learning for compensatory services. And that also will be in person or remote, and often will be at sites, if not always, will be at sites where ESY is offered. That will be a 3-hour window. But we will be providing transportation, and also all IEP goals will be able to be addressed through that. So if you don't have ESY in your IEP, you can still access those services if you're eligible through your CCS meeting with your team. So
That's great.
I hope that answers your question.
That's very helpful. Thank you for that. And then across a few other things. One, and just want to sort of celebrate and applaud the effort of the PIC to make sure that many of our older students have some employment opportunities this summer, and know that those are often very enriching opportunities. Also want to just appreciate Yi-Chen's comments around the whole family work and whole family supports, and appreciate Dr. Filippo Pierre's commitment to looking into that and of making note. I want to also ask about sort of the balance of in-person, which to me through this presentation is the goal of this, the efforts over the summer months, but will there also still be some opportunities for virtual experiences?
Yes. So we are pushing to make sure that there is enough in-person summer learning. So most of our summer programming will be in person. But we do want to make sure that for families that are uncomfortable coming in person, that there are virtual options available for them. So yes, there is a balance. It's more, it leans more towards the in-person, but there are virtual programs.
Yeah, no, I through my work, I've heard resounding requests for in-person opportunities, but want to make sure that there is some balance with virtual experiences. So we'll do another round for colleagues. I'll start with the lead sponsor, Councillor Campbell.
Councillor Sabi, Councillor Flaherty's here.
Councillor Flaherty, I'm sorry that I missed your arrival. Councillor Flaherty, welcome. And if you've got questions for the panel that's before us, and then we'll go back to the top.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, for hosting. Obviously, thanks to the lead sponsor, Councillor Campbell, and other colleagues. I've obviously been looking forward to learning more about this opportunity, and in particular as to how families are learning about these programs. I was happy to hear Marsha describe Digital Ready's partnership there. It's a great program. Dr. Sarah Cherry Rice does a phenomenal job, as she's done with Boston Year 13. So excited to see that there's opportunity there on the job front, but also wanted to learn a little bit about the 5th quarter summer recovery program. And the specific question is, what schools will have those programs? And kind of really dovetailing on your question, Madam Chair, it's just curious as to where the funding is coming from these programs. And at the end of the day, for me, we're playing catch up here. We're in a global economy. Other school districts and, quite frankly, other countries, almost have a leg up on us, and want to make sure that we're getting kids back to the classroom safely as quickly as possible, but also any opportunities throughout the summer to get their subject matter acumen back up to grade level. I know in conversations with a lot of parents, some are talking about holding their children back a year. I have no idea what impact that will be to our school district if, for example, every 4th or 5th grade parent decides to hold their child back. I have to think that would arguably probably like a tsunami for us in terms of just trying to figure out the different strands and what that's going to mean per grade level, per school. But these are real conversations that parents are having across the city and across the district as to whether or not to move their child forward or not. And it's great to see Ethan, Superintendent Davenport Burns, and would like to maybe get some feedback as to whether or not we're prepared for such a decision if parents decide to hold their children back because, in a sense, they've missed, an academic year, for better or for worse, whether it was remote. Remote was working for some students. It wasn't working for others. It was working for some families. It wasn't. We can't be a one-size-fits-all. I know that we tried to do that, but fact of the matter is that there's a lot of folks, children in particular, that missed out on an academic year, for better or for worse. And parents are grappling with that decision. So as we talk about sort of summer programming and what that's going to look like and how many kids are going to take advantage of that, and during that summer programming, are we going to be able to catch up for the subject matter material that they've lost out on this calendar year? And more importantly, what's going to happen when people decide to hold their child back a calendar year? So that's it for me in a nutshell. If whoever feels like taking a shot at some of those, that'd be great.
So I'll start, and then Ethan, if you could just chime in after that. And then I would like to answer your first question around credit recovery. So at the end of that, Shannon, if you could chime in as well. So thank you for that question. Superintendent Casillas has been working diligently around her Reimagine Recover initiative. And so we're really thinking deeply as a district around how to support all of our families in the different decisions that they're going to make for the fall. And so I know for sure that this is part of the plan and the thinking around how do we do that well. And so there is a larger team thinking about this. And I think at a much later time when that plan fully fleshed out could be brought forward, I think Dr. Casillas would love to engage in that kind of conversation. What I could say is that we are committed to meeting the needs of all of our families. And so if families decide that this is something that they want to do, we go back as an academics team and we think through what are the supports that they'll need. And so at this point, Ethan, if you could chime in around how we could support families around their special education needs.
Yes, certainly. And thank you for that. And thank you, Councillor Flaherty, for the question. It's a really good one. And what I would say is actually from a special education perspective, what we're really geared towards is making sure that we meet the individualized needs of students. And we're working really hard through our compensatory service meetings and our regular IEP meetings to make sure that we're able to do that. And the compensatory service meetings have actually been a really interesting and challenging opportunity to reflect on data and what we mean by progress and looking at progress and what it's actually going to take to make sure kids get there. And that's why we, I think through our summer learning, both through ESY, where we're really going to be looking at those IEP goals, and also the summer learning through the compensatory services that we're offering, we will be hopefully seeing those students make that progress that we're pushing on. But it is, and in terms of actually, if families think that they need another year, we're certainly willing to entertain that conversation. But I think Dr. Filippo answered that correctly, that those are really individualized conversations that you want to have. And when you really understand the data and know what's happening with each individual child and family.
I think there's one more part to that question. Thank you.
Yes. Shannon, could you answer around credit recovery, the number of programs and the type of programs?
Sure. There are 33 high schools in Boston Public Schools, and 25 of them are offering credit recovery programs. We have a credit recovery program in each neighborhood, and any student from any high school will be able to access credit recovery programs at other schools as long as they are offering the course that the student requires. So we're excited about a lot of accessible options for credit recovery spread throughout the city. And I'm happy to share a list of which schools those are if it is something that you would like.
That'd be great. I'd love to see the list.
Sure.
Very good. Thank you for all the work you guys are doing. I appreciate your attention to this and look forward to the rest of the hearing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. And I'll also use that credit recovery list for our household. Councilor Campbell, welcome back.
Thank you, Councilor Savvy George. And thank you to my colleagues on the questions, particularly around immigrant families, how we're doing outreach to immigrant families, and the gaps question, because I thought there would be a gap between families who are requesting programming and the districts providing programming. But it sounds like we're planning enough programming so anyone who requests or needs it will have access, which is fantastic. And I also wanted to uplift Councilor Mejia's question around student and family engagement in the development of these plans. And so I appreciate the response there, because I think that's critically important, because there's obviously always something to learn from them on how we make sure that we're having a great impact. A couple of questions I do still have. One is on just tutoring and making sure, or just seeing, what is available to our students K through 12 in terms of access to tutoring and not only access, but are we using teachers over the summer as tutors? Are we stipending teachers? Are we thinking about doing that? Will every family have access to a tutor, similar to sort of the mental health piece? And then the second question is planning time. How are we using this summer to either stipend educators or somehow working in partnership with educators and staff in terms of planning for the fall? This was something we heard when we were talking to educators and teachers around some missed opportunities for last summer, but being able to use this summer ahead of the fall to plan a host of other things. So how are we investing in additional planning time this summer for a smooth transition in the fall?
Sure. I know we're talking about the summer, but I do want to point out that the district did invest quite a bit of money, resources, money and time in the spring to provide free tutoring services to our students. And so we're hoping that this continues through the summer. And so, because right now what's happening is that students have access to both ELA, reading specifically, and math tutoring, right, through this program. And so in trying to continue that through the summer, we've done that by pushing it through the regular summer learning programs. There are some programs that offer specific tutoring. There's one program, for example, that's offering math tutoring. Not all the programs are doing it exactly the same. And so they are addressing the academic needs of students specifically, but not necessarily through a one-on-one tutor, right? And so that's something to think about as a family. If you want a program that specifically targets math skills or your reading skills and you need a small group tutoring, we need to provide enough information so that you choose the right programming. But there are programs that are providing tutoring. In terms of planning time for educators, we're actually involved in conversations. Right now, we're part of a professional learning group looking at how do we, much like Dr. Casilia's plan around reimagining schools, how do we reimagine professional learning for our for educators, for ourselves? How do we give additional planning time? And so we are in the process right now of thinking about the summer and reimagining the Teacher Summer Institute that that's about 3 days long. And so what is it that we need to plan for? And so we are engaging with our educators now, or we will be engaging with our educators through a task force to really understand what are their needs, and then to plan for, adequately plan for the Teacher Summer Institute. I also know that schools are very concerned about this, and so they're also doing their planning for the week before school starts. So.
This is helpful, and would love to continue to get updates from the district on the planning time conversation, because that has definitely come up. And particularly if we want our children back and to give that option of in-person instruction to our families, the summer is just so critical, of course, in terms of planning time. So I fully support anything we can do to support educators, stipend them to be able to make this happen. Clearly, there's not much time left before the summer will be here. And then on the tutoring piece, and I think it connects to an earlier point around how do we make sure that everything we're doing is through an equity lens and that families have equitable access, that it's targeted, that it's individualized for our students and our families. And on the tutoring piece, we do know, obviously, there are many families who have the ability to hire private tutors to have that one-on-one instruction, which in addition to the academic instruction, that one-on-one time is extremely valuable. There are other layers it offers in terms of social emotional supports. So I would really love to see how we can get, particularly with this infusion of new dollars, to a place where more students K through 12 have access to these individual tutoring experiences. I know there are some programs that have different types of, whether it's math or different types of instruction, but that additional layer or access piece, I think, is critically important, and just as important as the mental health, social emotional, social worker connection piece. So I want to stress that and would love to see how we can continue to expand access to that individualized approach in tutoring for families who request it. I saw Ethan.
Yeah, Dr. Filippo, if you don't mind, I would just jump in and say one of the things that we've learned through administering the compensatory services is that we're offering, part of it is after school tutoring, right? So that's part of like addressing the regression that has happened. And that seemed to be going pretty well. It's sort of a new program. So when we rolled it out in February, it was, we had some issues right at the beginning, but I think now we are able to enroll students in those programs and they are getting that kind of tutoring. It's not one-to-one, but it is small group. And that's just opening up a new window of time where students can get the learning. And I just really appreciate the push on sort of the academic growth piece. Like we've got to be looking and tracking that and seeing if we're really getting moving on the data in terms of academic growth. And I agree with you that that's critical. And as we move forward, we want to explore whether this model of doing compensatory services is something that we can do for tutoring, and it's not just for compensatory services, but students who just are behind. It's opening up a new window. So I think there would be a long way to get there, but it's certainly a model that we want to look at.
And I think the buzzer might have went off, or
it did, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Mejia? Councillor Mejia, any additional questions?
Yes, so I do a few questions. I'm just curious what efforts we've made to partner up with some of the local universities. I always know that, you always hear that it's hard to get mental health providers of color. I'm just curious what efforts are being made to build that pipeline in collaboration with, I know that Boston University has a program specifically designed for social workers and mental health providers of color. So wondering what efforts are being made there to engage. And then if Suleika is still here, I do have some questions that are specific to parents. So I'm not sure if she's here. We can answer that question. And if she's here, then I have a follow-up on the parent front.
Sure. Just in terms of recruitment, because our team doesn't recruit the social workers, that's something that I will have to get back to you on. I do know that the district does make an effort to ensure that the folks who work with our students, they look like our students. I know that we're not there yet, but we're continuing to make that effort. But it's something that I can get back to you on.
Yeah, and to that point, there is an organization. It's New Generations. They are based in Dorchester. There are a practice of Black and Brown clinicians only that serve the Boston area. So that is a practice that you may want to look into. New Generation Consultants. Because they may have a network of other clinicians that you may want to tap into. And then I know with DECO is an organization that I've worked with in the past. And, they do have some folks of color in that place too. I know they work specifically with McKinley's families, but it's just another place where you all may want to tap in and see folks who are doing this work. And I do have a question. It's specifically in terms of family and community engagement. So if Suleika is still here, You are?
I'm here.
Yay. Okay, good. So Suleika, I would love to get some insight from you as you hear all of these conversations about, what summer learning looks like. Do you have any suggestions in terms of what the district can think beyond summer learning, like getting ahead of this? How are we, what can we be doing better to not only engage families, but to also think about this conversation beyond summer learning? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that definitely the district partnering with teachers, just because us as parents and teachers, we kind of where teachers are the students' second parents. So I think that usually really partnering with teachers in order to engage the families that they deal with from day to day, because I think the teachers know the families best. So just ensuring that we use that, that way to do some of the outreach is also another way that I think would be helpful. Again, going to traditional ways of doing outreach, whether it's a phone call or text, emails with clear links as to where families can go, hopefully in the language that, they speak. So I think that that's very important. And I'm sorry, if you could just repeat your second.
Yeah. So as you start thinking about, and thank you for that. And I think that culturally competent piece about communication is real. You have to speak in ways that people can understand it. Translation gets lost sometimes. So I think that's a really great point. The question is about thinking about ahead past summer learning. What are some of the things that you think and that you've heard from the parents on the council that they'd like to see beyond summer learning? What can we learn from this summer learning program that maybe we can carry on into the fall?
So I think that most of these things, going into next fall, right? I think it has to be a continuation of what the kids are going to be doing this summer, right? So whatever those curriculums, just making sure that the once kids do come in September, that the teachers and whoever is aware of what they were able to learn during the summer and what it is that they will continue to need as they navigate. Because I think that this is in reality when kids are really going to be, and again about that transitional part, right? I think that this summer is going to be that transitional part for the kids, for them to learn to adapt to be back in person. So I think that it's just thinking about how those two things will connect come September. And then another thing that I know is just ensuring transparency and making sure that parents understand what the protocols are going to be and what the kids are learning and how that's going to continue on into the reopening in the fall. So just learning from what goes on this summer, right? Because again, it is going to be the first time that we're going to be back in person, and just kind of planning ahead, planning for, if cases do so happen to go up for some reason, just making sure that we have different plans for different scenarios and just passing those along to parents, for the summer and for September. So I think that it is going to be a learning opportunity for all of us to adapt to get back to being there. And I think that ensuring that we keep a hybrid component as well is also important, just because we know that there are many families that have been more impacted by COVID and those things. So again, thinking about safety, just kind of ensuring that we, try to be flexible as possible. And then another thing is actually reaching out to families, because I know that a lot of families, I've heard even in this hearing here today, that many families have to reach to the district to ask for these services. I think that the district needs to really make it a point to reach out to families. Again, a phone call, if that doesn't work, text, if that doesn't work, just making sure that we're, just doing that as much as we can. And then that safety piece and transparency piece going into the fall.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And one last question. This we didn't talk about the higher need students. I'm curious, this is for Ethan. What does the summer learning plan look like for students who are in the McKinley School? Can you talk a little bit about kind of what the outreach effort has been? What are some of the goals and objectives that we're planning to put in place to help support our more vulnerable and socially, emotionally high need students?
Sure, certainly, and I can certainly get back to you with more details from Cindy Nielsen, the school leader from McKinley, but they will be offering, I think every single student at McKinley has ESY in their programming, so they will be offered the opportunity of at least 5 weeks of that. I know, as you described, that WDECO does partner with McKinley to provide the mental health support there as well, but they also provide academic support throughout that time as well. And I do know that because of construction at McKinley, also they will hopefully be in a site with air conditioning, which would be exciting as well this summer. So, but if you would like more information on sort of the McKinley, Horace Mann, and Carter in terms of the day schools and what summer programming they have, I could certainly get that to you.
Yeah, I would definitely appreciate some insight there, especially because we already know that those students were already significantly behind in terms of loss, and now they're even further behind. So I'm really curious about what plan is in place to not even get them up to speed, but to make sure that when September comes around, that we've done our due diligence to support these students. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George, again for your leadership. I also wanted to acknowledge Councilor Campbell as well for her important work as well. Maybe the question I have is for Ethan. Ethan, if someone goes to a particular school for tutoring in a particular subject, will there be also access to food at that site? Will there be access to kind of like a one-stop site where there'll be food access? There might be a mental health counselor or someone that might be able to provide additional assistance since that person is already at the school, maybe coordinating agencies, bringing Office of Food Access in, maybe bringing the Office of Immigrant Advancement in, and maybe other city departments that have an impact on the life of a student and their family.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Flynn, for that. Certainly, at our ESY sites, we work really hard to coordinate services, food, and other mental health services as well. And so I don't know if Shannon or Dr. Filippo would like to add anything on top of that, but certainly we work to coordinate our services so that that is available. I know last summer we worked hard to make sure that the food was available at the sites. I would assume that it's going to continue this summer, but I can't guarantee that right now.
Yeah, I can talk to that, Ethan.
Dr. Phillips. Yeah.
So yes, any site that is open to receive students this summer, whether it has ESY or one of our partner programs, OEL, any of the programs will have food access for the summer. So that is something that we will have. The social workers will not necessarily be on site at every school. They'll be assigned to neighborhoods and then as needed be available there. In addition, we will also have nurses at every site to help make sure that students are safe. And then students and any building that has more than one program will have a coordinating director at it to ensure that any parents who need additional information or help finding resources will be able to get to find those things.
Thank you, Shannon, and thank you, Ethan. I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Councilor Savi George.
Thank you very much, Councilor Flynn. And it looks as if Councilor Flaherty has left us. Councilor Campbell, this may be a great time to wrap up or ask any final questions. Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George. Sorry to move to plug in my laptop, which is about to die. But I just have, I guess, a follow-up on some additional questions on two things. One was just on the family engagement piece. And I do recognize that this is sometimes where the district is is most challenged, and some schools do it really well at the school-based level. So I'm just curious if there's been any thought on stipending parents to help with the engagement around outreach, and I'm just thinking outside the box. Obviously, there are a lot of community-based organizations that work with parents. Yi Chen was on here, and of course, Suleika and some others. But just curious if we've thought outside the box on the family engagement piece.
I'm going to invite Shannon to respond, and I may chime in at the end of that.
And I hope that Shannon, your response will also maybe add some of the work of our family liaisons that we've continued to onboard in our schools across the district.
Yeah, so in terms of connecting families with programs, that is part of where we leverage the relationships that family liaisons have with the families at our schools. For planning purposes, each of the different initiatives works with families who have been previous participants in the programs to really hone in on the things that worked well for their students, and then places where the programs need to improve. So in particular, I oversee the fifth quarter programs, which are both school-based and community-based organizations. And we ask that those programs reflect on feedback from families through the application process when they request funding from the district for those programs. So they are asked to incorporate family feedback and any additional funding that they require to make sure that those things happen is very seriously taken into consideration, because we want to make sure that those programs are the best fit for the students.
Thank you. And I do recognize that not every school has a family engagement specialist, right? Not every school is equipped even with probably enough human capital to do the culturally competent outreach that we would need in such a diverse district, right? So I just do think this is an opportunity. We have a lot of folks, frankly, who are unemployed, and sort of thinking outside the box on ways in which to maximize participation from families in the programs that we are going to offer over the summer in particular. So it was just a thought. And then lastly, I appreciated some of the comments earlier in the hearing around curriculum, which is a larger discussion, of course, for the district, but really looking at the summer and how we can be incorporating anti-racist curriculum and other opportunities, given not just what we're talking about locally, but frankly, what we're talking about nationally. It's a trying time for all of us if you're watching anything with respect to what is happening with police brutality in this country. And so I do think there have been a lot of calls from families and students to really think about our curriculum. And so just wanted to give kudos to folks on the Zoom who are really being intentional around the curriculum piece. So thank you. I will wrap up and just, thank all.
We do have public testimony, so don't get too wrapped up.
So you want, so I'll wait then.
For final questions. Okay, very good. But any other final questions at this point before we get to?
No, I'll go to public testimony.
Right. And then we'll come back if there are additional questions. Want to make sure that we are, so I'm going to welcome in Edith Bazile and our other. I do see that there is a. 1 second, sorry, just make sure. So I have Lady Caesano and Edith Bazile who would like to offer some testimony. There is one other person in the panelist group that may want to offer testimony. If you do, please raise your hand. And I'll start with Lady. Welcome.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Well, good evening now, I guess, Boston City Councilor. My name is Lady Caesano, and I am an outreach director at Educators for Excellence in Boston. We're an education nonprofit that works to ensure educator voices and include also policy-making decisions. I'm a former educator who once taught in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and became a student advocate for Chelsea Public Schools. And I also went to BPS, Boston Public Schools. And I'm currently an organizer and an East Boston resident and advocate. And I'd like to thank you for creating this space to discuss student learning during the current pandemic. As an active member of the East Boston community, here's what I have heard. Educators, students, and parents alike, I've spoken to all of them, and are all overwhelmed by the pandemic for several reasons. Firstly, there is a tech literacy gap that has impacted the learning environment and academic performance of students. Second, East Boston is composed of many Central and South American immigrants who are working class, may have language barriers, and unfortunately, many did not receive a formal education. And as a result of such, they do not have the abundance of resources that more privileged communities do to aid their students' learning. Third, the parents have to work in order to navigate these learning systems that's disproportionately disenfranchising them and marginalizing them further. On top of this, there is hyper-gentrification happening all over Boston, particularly East Boston as well. And there is housing and job insecurities for these vulnerable residents, and that is also impacting the learning environment, the home environment, the safe environment that the students need in order to process the information that they're learning and actually do something with it. It is clear that we need to be working over time to reach and speak with parents and students in East Boston and other similar neighborhoods to meet them where they're at and to assess how to best help. I also want to elevate, and I know we have been discussing this already, but I want to elevate the voices of our E4E Boston BPS educators who teach us in Roxbury. And here's what she had to say on this topic, and why teachers must be at the table in the forefront of any solutions regarding this. This should be absolutely a time for teachers to talk about next steps. Last summer should have been a time for educators to plan for remote learning. Instead, we spent the summer fighting about what learning model we should have. And we have to make a plan and stick with it and plan for it. Educators and schools personnel are great at adapting. All they need is time and resources and opportunity to do so. At E4E, we believe that assessing and addressing student learning going forward will be and will take both resources and willingness to radically reconsider the systems and structures we've put in place for schools, whether it be schedules and how we move students through content and what content we even teach and emphasize, and et cetera, et cetera. We've provided a huge infusion of resources through the federal stimulus to start making this happen, but it's all up to all of us to push harder if we want to use this crisis as a catalyst for transformation of our educational systems. Overall, I am here to elevate the underrepresented East Boston community, and I hope that this can touch everyone in here because the families here, the students here are going to be deeply impacted like many areas of Boston. But the immigrant ELL population here really needs the city's support and help and empathy as well. Thank you again for creating an opportunity to hear all of these different ways that the pandemic has impacted students and their families, and we look forward to continuing to have these conversations.
Thank you, lady. Thanks for joining us. Edith, welcome.
Thank you so much, Councilor Isabi George, and thank you, Councilor Campbell and Councilor Mejia for having this event. I didn't find out about this hearing until a few minutes before it started, so I don't necessarily have a statement, but I do have some things that I'd like to say. First, I want to thank Dr. Filippo Pear for her explanation of how summer is being structured, particularly with regard to summer learning, and especially the summer opportunities for jobs and internships with PIC, which is a strong partner of Boston. So it's wonderful to hear that some community agencies and immigrant communities are being contacted who don't feel comfortable necessarily meeting directly with the district, but their input is being gathered, as well as the information that's gathered from school leaders around parent concerns. I would also like to echo that it's really important, since learning has been happening in the home, for some additional outreach to happen with parents as well as students. So I think Councilor Mejia talked about that, as well as Suleika. I want to talk today, and so my name is Edith Brazil. I'm a BPS graduate. I'm a longtime BPS teacher and administrator. I'm the mother of a BPS graduate, and I'm a grandmother of a current BPS student who is in first grade with autism. So today I want to talk about special ed, because I think we have a problem here, particularly with regard to equity issues. There has been racial equity issues in special ed in terms of access. Bringing in my own personal narrative, I will tell you that in my granddaughter's IEP meeting, when I brought up compensatory services, I was directly told that it was not appropriate to talk about compensatory services within the IEP team meeting. And I did report that directly to the special ed department and got no response. So there is a problem. I've had some training, some workshops with parents that I facilitated who didn't know about compensatory services. So I would venture to say that based upon my own personal experience, as well as parents of color, that they don't either know that compensatory services are available or they are being denied compensatory services for their children. So my first question would be, what is, or whether the racial equity tool is being used to ensure there is some equity around getting the word out, but also when parents bring up compensatory services. I've also been told by some BPS staff that they have been told at the school level not to discuss compensatory services unless parents bring it up. So that's a real problem that needs to be addressed. Now, I didn't get a look at the slide closely, but we know that we're getting extra funding because there has been some learning loss, particularly with our highest need students. So I think I saw a $7 million figure, and that's money that is being provided, but that money is short. It's not going to last forever. And from what I heard, there are 4,859 seats and 3,332 seats are projected to be taken for this summer of 2021. That leaves about 1,527 seats empty, which is a real problem. That's a third of the seats not being filled for extended school year. So I would ask you to not look at summer planning as a binary, take it or leave it. Parents may not be able to take advantage of what you're offering because of the way in which you're offering it. And I would encourage you to be flexible and speak to parents directly about what services and which services would work for them, so that they're not completely left out. So 1,527 seats, that's a lot of seats. That's a lot of money that's going to go unused. And that should be used for students in some form or fashion. So having some flexibility with that. I also appreciate Councilor Mejia talking about McKinley School. In terms of in-person learning, let me just give you some figures. For the Horace Mann, about 35% of the students are taking advantage of in-person learning. For the Henderson, it's up over 90%. For the McKinley School, for our students, Black and Brown students primarily with social, emotional, and behavioral challenges, only 10% are taking advantage of in-person learning. I think that needs to be looked at. In terms of looking at those population, I heard it was said that they are eligible, all of the students from McKinley, to enroll in ESY. That is a service that's provided. I want to amplify and say that Wadiko is a wonderful service at McKinley. That partnership is a real support for students, but students will not be able to take advantage of it if they're not in school, if they're chronically absent, if they are not connected with these services. So there's a real equity issue around our Black and Brown, our Black and Latinx students particularly, as well as our English learners who are underperforming at the most lowest level in special education with regard to connecting to these services. So I would like to get some answers on that. My own personal narrative and not getting an answer when I reported from an assistant director who said, well, we can't talk about compensatory services. That is happening, and we need to acknowledge that and repair that, because parents who have knowledge, and for someone who's worked in the district for 32 years, there's nothing that I don't know about special ed. In terms of entitlement, I also serve on the DESE Special Ed Advisory Panel. I was told it wasn't appropriate to talk about compensatory services in my granddaughter's IEP team meeting. So yes, we do have a problem that needs to be addressed. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope I can get some answers.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bazil, and I'm sure and I saw Ethan making some notes. Imagine that the team is as well. And we'll get you, I'm sure we'll have a response for you directly, as we don't generally do that through public testimony. At this point, I don't see any other members of the public who are present for public testimony. So Councilor Campbell, Councilor Mejia, Councilor Flynn, if there is a brief last question, but brief, please, as we are at the 2-hour mark now. I'll go to Councilor Mejia and then to Councilor Campbell for final remarks.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I don't want to change the way we do business here, but I am curious to the question that Edith did ask and wondering if I can use some of my time to get a response to the question specifically around I don't even know how to say the word.
Compensatory services. Sure.
Yeah.
If we could have a brief response, perhaps, or a comment from a member of the BPS team. Oh, you're on mute.
On mute. Sorry about that. And thank you, Ms. Bazil and Councilor Mejia, for your questions around compensatory services. We've worked really hard to set up a system that I've talked about briefly to make sure that students get what they need. We realized very quickly into the process that, as Ms. Bazil mentioned, that equity was going to be a huge issue here, and making sure that students and families that we're able to get the word out about compensatory services, and that we made it possible for students really and families to get what they need. We worked with Parent University and had a number of workshops so that we could get the word out to them, and had translators and everything at those meetings so that it was in the in-home languages, because we know it was new for everybody. And so we really wanted to get the word out. We did do those meetings. We also worked with SpedPAC to get that word out as well. So as well as sending letters out to every single student with disabilities in the district. So we did make efforts to address the equity issue that is real, and that is there with regard to compensatory services. With regard specifically to the meetings, I'm not saying I know everything that happens in the district by any stretch, but we have certainly issued guidance that says that compensatory services may be talked about at IEP meetings, that it can be a tag on to a regular meeting, whether that be an annual review or a reevaluation. So that should be standard practice, and certainly I'm willing to look at where that may not be happening, because again, as a number of you have mentioned, there are a lot of funds out there, and there's no reason for us not to work hard to try and make sure that kids' learning loss and regression is met, and we're working really hard to make that happen.
Thank you.
And then lastly, with regard to the in-person at McKinley, I would just say that I'm not familiar with that data, but we'll certainly look at that. And also that at the McKinley schools, at all 3 day schools, we made sure that they were eligible for 5 days as of April 26th. So hopefully that makes it easier for some of our most vulnerable students to come back to school sooner.
So thank you for that. And I just wanted to just really know and underscore Councilor Campbell's point in terms of paying parents and stipends. And while I do appreciate the whole notion of having family liaisons, I think that we really need to start thinking about a different strategy. I know when I led my organization, we were really intentional about making sure that parents were compensated, because the only people that are not paid are the people who are living these realities. Meanwhile, everyone sitting around the table either works for the district, has a nonprofit. So I think it's really important for us to think about that in terms of compensation. And not everyone is connected or feels comfortable with their family liaison, and people don't trust the district and they don't trust the system. So I think that the more opportunities we can create for parents to actually be the ones that are the leaders of these conversations, then we're going to start really seeing some of these changes, because we just don't feel like we're seen or heard. And I say we because I'm a parent too, right? And I'm a city councilor. Sometimes I don't even feel heard. So I just want to really underscore the importance of really leaning in on the parents and creating space for them to lead and to be compensated for their work. because it's hard to juggle your ends meet and then have to show up to a meeting. All everybody's getting paid at the table except you.
Thank you.
Councillor,
Yeah. Oh,
if I may add just very quickly, following up on that, the Office of English Learners has started a program that follows along that premise. We call it Parents Helping Parents. At this point, it's a very small program of 8 parents. But the notion is that our parents do have access to networks of communication, and that they have a set of expertise. And we are trying this out to see if our parents of English learners find this setup supportive.
sorry about that. Suleika, I think you had a response also to Councilor Mejia's question.
Sorry, so I do not have a response, but I did want to uplift something that Edith said, and also Councilor Mejia, it will add to my answer around your question about how we could think about some of these things going forward. I'm also like the finance co-chair for the Citywide Parent Council, and I know that when it comes to funding, this money that we are getting is temporary and is not always going to be here. So as a parent, I just want to ensure that whenever we do go back into next summer or even September, that a lot of these things that we are adding because of this funding is not taken away in the future, that we could continue to add more as we continue to go on forward. And that was just my question, just making sure that we kind of try to make these things as permanent as we can going forward.
Thank you very much, Suleika. And I think this is probably the best time to wrap up. Councilor Campbell, you have final remarks today.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George, and thank you to my council colleagues for joining. And thank you to folks from the administration, as well as folks in the community, not only on the panel, but also public testimony. And Edith, I appreciated you as well. And I think it was Lady, the previous teacher, talking about East Boston and her experience. Clearly, there's still more work to do, and we don't have that much time. Before you know it, the summer obviously will be here. So I look forward to some more updates on just the opportunity to, whether it's stipend educators and teachers, but to do a lot more to prepare for the possibility of planning over the summer for the fall and creating space for our educators to do that in partnership, of course, with school leaders as well. Definitely looking forward to more information on the access to tutors and one-on-one tutoring experiences, which we know are incredibly valuable. How do we make sure that more families have access to that experience, particularly with some of these additional federal dollars? On the parent engagement and outreach, we always need to do better. And I firmly believe Suleika, Edith, and so many others, Yi-Chen, there are organizations that are doing great work in partnership with families. Of course, parents want to be a part of the solution as well. And I think there's an opportunity to think about investing more in this work. Sylvia mentioned this incredible program. That's critical when you think about English language learners and how you reach those parents and how you share networks. Special needs students, the same thing. How do we invest more dollars into these types of programming to do a better job in terms of community engagement? How do we invite these organizations and parents to be a part of the planning at the beginning versus later, and to do that in partnership with the district in the beginning? I think it's critically important. And then lastly, I will say, I absolutely agree with Suleika. These investments are critically important. There has to be a way to make sure they're permanent and sustainable. So thank you. I look forward to continuing the hearing. Thank you, Councilor Sabi George, and thank you to all the panelists. Continue to stay safe. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilor Campbell. And with that, we will adjourn the rest of this meeting. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.